Hey, it's Idahosa Ness from mimicmethod.com, and today we're going to talk about how to know when you're fluent. And I want to give you 7 milestones to know that you're on the path towards fluency. Now, the word fluency is pretty challenging to nail down, right? Because in one sense, does it mean I know all the words, I can speak perfectly in any situation? Obviously, no one can do that, not even in their first language. So, fluency, when I think about it, I think about the etymology of the word, the origin. And the Latin word that it comes from is fluere, which means to flow. And those of you who've done our programs know that I'm all about flow. What we teach you in the Mimic Method is how to tune into and feel the flow of Spanish, French, Chinese, whatever your language is. And what I mean by that is, first we open up your ears so that you're allowing the sounds of the language, the melody, the rhythm, the articulation to flow into your mind. And then we tune up your pronunciation, your tongue, your lips, everything, so that sounds can flow out of your mouth. And then once you have the sound flowing, what's captured within those sounds is the meaning, is the story behind the person who's talking to you in that conversation. So fluency for me, what it really is about is being able to have a naturally flowing conversation, a naturally flowing learning curve where just being in the world and paying attention and noticing things allows you to learn and become part of that culture. The first milestone is you stop feeling self-conscious in conversation. So we all know when you go into a conversation, when you're learning a language, it sucks. Even me, I've learned several languages. Each time, it sucks. I hate it. You go into a conversation, you don't really know what's going on. You're kind of like, what are you talking about, blah, blah, blah. And then people look at you like, blah, 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 blah. And then you're like, oh, crap, it's my time to talk. And then you get super self-conscious and nervous. You start speaking, stuttering. Everyone looks at you like you're stupid. And you're like, oh, what's going on with this guy? And then you say it, they don't understand you. And they're like, I'm sorry, what did you say? Your pronunciation, your whole life is just, I can't deal with it right now. And it's terrible. It's a nerve-wracking experience. My kudos to anyone watching who's gone through it and have subjugated themselves to the nerve-wracking experience that is trying to speak to people in a foreign language. But if you muster up the courage and the persistence and you keep at it and assuming everything's opened up here and here so you can just get better and better each time, eventually you arrive at this point where you're sitting in a conversation, people are talking, you're like, yeah. An idea comes to you of something you want to contribute to the conversation, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's a good point, because I think Bradley said blah, 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 in my opinion, blah, blah, blah. And you say something, and you're like, and then it hits you like, oh, wow, I just spoke in this language without feeling self-conscious, without being conscious of the fact that I'm learning the language, and I'm an outsider, and I'm going to mess it up. Not necessarily that you got the grammar and everything perfect. It's just a feeling that, hey, I was able to communicate without worrying about it. And that's a huge milestone, because that means from then on, you can go into conversation and not feel that huge resistance holding you back and just start flowing into it, going in. And that is when you start to see your gains really accelerate, because now you're looking forward to conversation. It's an opportunity for you to learn more and express yourself and understand people. The second milestone is when you laugh in time at a spontaneous joke. So you can learn a joke on TV, or someone teaches it to you, or maybe you hear it but you get it 10 seconds later and you kind of laugh awkwardly. That moment when you're in a conversation and someone just kind of spontaneously says something funny and then everyone's like, ha 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 ha, right? Before that, you get once again very self-conscious because everyone's laughing and you're like, wait, what happened? What I missed? What's going on, right? But then when they say something and you genuinely spontaneously get it and laugh instantly, that's an indication that the humor, that the meaning and the emotion is flowing into you subconsciously without you even realizing it. So I always think of language as one big inside joke anyways. That's all it really is when you think about it. I am speaking to you in our inside joke of English, but if I leave this context and start speaking in Spanish, that's just, hey, we're over here, we have this inside joke over here, Spanish. We're all laughing. You don't know what's going on. So you're like, wait, I want to get in on that joke. That is the core motivation to learning, in my opinion, learning a language, getting in on the inside joke. The next milestone you may have is when you use a word or expression that you don't remember learning. So when you first start a language, someone tells you a word or how to say something, and you're like, okay, how do I say that? You mimic it, you repeat it, and then you go into a conversation. You're like, what was that word? Oh yeah, boom, and you use it. So everything you use was explicitly taught to you, and you can probably remember to some degree, the context where you learned it. But sometimes you'll be speaking, and this is once again a milestone towards fluency, and you'll be speaking, and then all of a sudden you'll just bring out a word in that language, and then you're like, whoa, how do I know that word? Or it's even better is you use a phrase or a grammatical structure, and you're like, I've never used this. This is beyond my explicit knowledge of the language, but I feel like it's right. And I don't know why I feel like it's right. And you have that moment of kind of doubt for yourself, and then you look at the person in your eye and you're like, did I get that right? And he's like, yeah, that was fine. And you're like, no way. And you I guessed it right. But really what happened was, once again, if you open up the flow of information, subconsciously your brain is learning how to communicate in the language. So you don't need a teacher to sit down and write things down for you. If you're paying attention and you have the ability to capture what's going on in your environment, it'll start to program your brain subconsciously. So when you enter into a conversation, all of a sudden you're doing things and you're speaking from a place you didn't even know you had. And that is a major indication that you are going towards fluency. And the next one is similar, and this is when you've been speaking the language for a while, and then you go back to English or whatever your first language is, and you forget how to say something in English. So I've had times in the past where I'll come back from traveling, and I'll be speaking to someone, and I'm so immersed in that other language context that when I come to a word or a concept, it comes to me first in that language. But I'm speaking to someone who doesn't speak that language. I'm speaking English, my first language. And I'm like, yeah, it's like, what's the word in English, right? So when you find yourself like just not knowing how to say something in your first language that you already know how to say in your target foreign language, that's a huge sign that you've been thinking so much in that language that these contexts come to you more fluidly there than they do in English or whatever your first language is. So that's once again an indication that things are flowing. You're becoming fluent. You misremember someone as being good at English. What do I mean by that? Well, when you get really immersed in the culture, I was living in Portugal for a while, for example, and or Brazil rather. I was in Brazil as well, and I'm just speaking to everyone in Portuguese. It's just my life. I'll meet these people, blah blah blah, and then I'll speak to someone like an American, and they'll ask me, "What's the English like there?" Right? Or they'll ask me about a specific person. Oh, how is Sarah's English? And I'm like, oh yeah, her English is fine. It's fine. And then afterwards, I'm like, wait a minute, is her English fine? And then I'll find out that Sarah speaks no English. In fact, she's terrible at English. But I assume she was. Why? Because when someone asks me how's their English, what my mind is interpreting that is, can you communicate with that person? And I'm like, yeah, sure. That person's a very easy person to communicate with. But I forget that I was communicating with that person in Portuguese, because really it's just about communication. The language is a second layer concept. It doesn't really matter. But when you're at that level of fluency where you kind of forget what language you were speaking with the people at the time, or you forget what that person's ability is, because all you know is that that person in the category of someone I can flow with, someone I can have a fluent conversation with, then you start to forget those kinds of details. So when you find yourself in that situation, that's a good indication that you've gone so deep in the language, you're so fluent that you don't even remember all these other kind of more superficial denominations. You cringe when people curse. So I'm not going to do it, but if all of a sudden I said some really foul stuff right now on this YouTube video in English, and you're a native speaker of English, you would have a feeling of like, huh, right? I wasn't expecting him to say that, right? Like, your mother, like those kind of like really deep curse words coming from like a place of pure anger. Now, when you first get into a language and you're kind of like a little school kid, you're like, hee, let me learn these, these curse words and blah, blah, blah. You learn those things and you start like saying them. And then, I highly encourage you, by the way. This always happens, I see, with people who are new to a language. They'll learn curse words and then they'll just be frolicking down the streets, screaming them out loud because they think they're funny. They're like, yeah. But I'm like, dude, you do realize you're just walking down the street saying the most heinous stuff you can possibly say in this language. So to you, it might be funny, but to these people, it's not. It's actually quite offensive. So the thing is, you don't have that emotional connection to the language yet. It's still just a bunch of sounds, a bunch of funny sound effects that these people over there are making. When you're in the language, what that means is those sounds, they're imbued with a certain emotional context and feel. So to be fluent and to be flowing into that culture, into those people, that means that those emotions become part of you. So if I'm walking down the street and I hear someone cursing in Chinese or in Portuguese or whatever, then I'll have a kind of like kind of thing because those sounds have meaning to me because I'm fluent in those languages. So if same way how getting jokes is an indication that you're emotionally connected to the positive sense of the language, cringing at curse words is an indication that you're emotionally connected to the negative side of the emotional landscape of that language. So once again, we're really talking about not just your, the Academy of Français, how they're going to test you on your explicit knowledge. We're talking about fluency, flow, intuition. Are you connected emotionally? If so, you're going to cringe when people say some foul stuff. Now, finally, number 7. This is kind of the holy grail that I try to get to as quickly as possible when I'm learning a language. And that's, you're in a conversation and a native speaker forgets that you are a foreigner. And what happens typically is you'll be talking and then they'll either kind of make a joke about foreigners or about, in my case, Americans or something like that. But they'll say it in a way that you would tell the joke if there was no Americans in the room or if there's no foreigners in the room. And then someone else would be like, dude, you do realize like Idahosa's here. And they'd be like, oh yeah. Well, I mean, Idahosa's not like he's not like that. He's like one of us, So that kind of experience where you're so deeply embedded in the culture and you sound like them, you speak like them, that psychologically, emotionally, maybe intellectually the person knows that you're from a different place, but you've tapped into the flow so well that emotionally they don't even recognize you as being different. And you know that because in conversation, they do things that indicate that they forgot that. Another example is if they make reference to a deep cultural reference that there's no way you're going to know about, like, a children's TV cartoon when you were 7. Like, no one who is not 7 in that country is going to know that. So they start bringing out those allusions and those references, then that's an indication that they're just subconsciously putting you in the category of one of us, which is where you want to be. Now, obviously, you have to ask for clarification. And like, what does that mean? And that gets you even deeper into the language. But really, that's what we want. We want people to open the door for us and bring us in without them realizing they're doing it because you just naturally make them feel comfortable. To me, that's what fluency is about. It's not about, what you get on some random bureaucratic test. It's about the ability to flow into a group of people, into a specific person in their world, and have them flow back into you and have that flow going fluently. And such a great feeling. If you've experienced any of these things, or you have your own experiences or your own milestones that indicate that you're fluent, please leave it in the comments. Like this video if you like it and you want to get more videos like this. And hit subscribe as well. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers. And that will encourage me to make more videos to help you learn, help you feel inspired, to tap into the flow and become fluent in a different language. Thank you.